Good afternoon, everyone. May I have your attention for the safety briefing?
Welcome to the University of the West Indies Teaching and Learning Complex, Auditorium A1.
Thank you very, very much, Rebecca. Good evening, everyone. And thank you for coming. Honourable Fitzgerald Hinds, Member of Parliament, Minister of National Security, Government of Trinidad and Tobago. Ms. Erla Harewood-Christopher, Commissioner of Police, Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. Honorable Campus Principal, and we thank you for facilitating us in having this event here. The Trade and Economic Development Unit of the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine. Dr. Akola Lewis Cameron, Dean of the Faculty of Social Sciences. Other speakers tonight, Professor Raja Hussain, Dr. Randy C. Prasad, Mr. Vivek Charan, and these would be introduced later. And of course, the Honorable Basir Pandey, former Prime Minister, who is here with us, heads and other members of the management of the UWI St. Augustine campus, staff and students of the UE St. Augustine campus, specially invited guests, members of the media, and everyone present and online and following this particular seminar. My name is Boindrada Tiwari. Most of you would know me as Bo, and that's fine. We are extremely pleased to welcome you to the National Conversation on Crime, Productivity, and Economic Growth. This is on behalf of the Trade and Economic Development Unit. This is their first National Conversation seminar since the period of the pandemic, which disrupted all of our lives and almost everything. Tonight we are gathered here to speak about an issue that has been affecting citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. All of us are affected, and that issue is crime. The type of conversation, although difficult, is pertinent and must be conducted so that we can move forward, because at the end of the day, while we know the problems, while we identify the issues, and we understand them, solutions have to be found. And therefore, I want to move quickly into the program. My job is very simple. It is to manage tonight's program and make sure that the speakers stick to their time. And secondly, it is to manage the flow of the program. It is also to give you, in the audience here and on the online system, an opportunity to ask questions and to get a response. And the whole idea is that when we leave here, we will be better off in the issues that we discuss here and whether they have any value for the things we would like to see in our society. And I hope that we will be able to achieve that this evening. Our first speaker is Mr. Vivek Charan. And this program is a collaborative venture between the trade unit of the University of the West Indies and the Confederation of Chambers of Commerce of Trinidad and Tobago, small chambers that are regional in nature and basically involve community and family and small businesses in Trinidad and Tobago. So our first speaker is Mr. Vivek Charan, and I want to invite him. He's chairman of the Confederation of Regional Business Chambers. Mr. Charan graduated with a degree in law and history from the University of Kent at Canterbury in the United Kingdom. He has an MBA from the Arthur Lockjack Graduate School of Business of the University of the West Indies. He's one of the owner-managing directors of Charan's Bookstores, a past president of the Summer Business Association consecutively for 10 years, a past director at NGL, and is currently the chairman of the Confederation of Regional Business Chambers. Mr. Charan, would you please come and speak, and I will take your seat.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. All protocols observed. I have to say that the Confederation of Regional Business Chambers, we're very happy to partner with UWI today to bring this event to you. It took a lot of work from behind the scenes, and in advance, I'd like to thank everybody, including the Minister and the Commissioner of Police, for being here. In fact, tonight we're very fortunate to have two of the biggest legal guns here with us in the room. And no, the business community did not get this from Double G. I'm talking about the Minister of National Security and also the Commissioner of Police. We're very happy to have them here today to take time off their busy schedule. Tonight is not about the blame game, ladies and gentlemen, but about finding the way forward. So I hope that our conversation this evening will be insightful, productive, and respectful to all included. Ladies and gentlemen, I can stand here as a business person and tell you all the ways crime is hurting business. But the truth is, you would have heard it all before. You heard about the escalating costs of keeping your business safe and secure, an environment of perceived escalating crime, an environment of inflation, an environment of low commercial activity. You've heard about the lack of business confidence to grow and expand and invest in the economy because, ladies and gentlemen, crime creates loss. I think that's the bottom line. Wherever there is crime, there is loss. A loss of consumer confidence because the majority of shoppers, consumers are women. They are the ones that come out and actually shop in many of the small businesses across the nation during the days. A loss of travel confidence. We have travel advisory. Trinidad and Tobago right now says, let's reconsider travel to Trinidad and Tobago. In Trinidad and Tobago, I think we're very serious about wanting to improve our tourism sector. And we did quite well for Carnival, I will say, and I think that we're doing well with the cruise ships. However, we must ask ourselves as a single destination, tourist spot for families and new travelers, what do those travel advisories say about our current situation? Crime is not just about crime, ladies and gentlemen. Crime is a virus that affects many key things in our economy, the same way a virus does on our person. It affects things in our economy, our society, and our private lives. And that's why when it comes to crime, there's certain inconvenient truths, ladies and gentlemen. We are in the midst of, let's say, a self-inflicted genocide, where the target is young men between the ages of 16 to 25, and that's the age of the majority of youths that are killed in gang-related tit-for-tat revenge killings perpetrated by a handful of older senior men that are known as the gang leaders. And these men put as many young bodies as they can between themselves and the people that they target. And these young men do their bidding, much the same way that you had the head of the Hydra in Greek mythology. You cut out one head, another one springs up. Unfortunately, what we have here is that when one head is shot dead, another young head pops up. And all this time, the gang leaders remain safe behind the scenes. Now, criminality, I must say, is not the fault of the police or the government, or certainly not the origin. The reality is that when it comes to crime, the fault of crime should be laid firstly at the feet of those who perpetrate it. They should not be absolved of responsibility for taking up the gun and the culture of violence and the social behaviors that go with that. The only people who should be blamed are the perpetrators of crime. It is, however, upon the government and the police who have the sole authority to deal with criminals, to protect us, the citizens, and win the one crime, one battle at a time. Because to us, sometimes, unfortunately, it doesn't look like our side is always winning, or it's the winning side. Now, the culture of crime has triumphed over many or most of our religious and societal values over time, and those of the family unit. The culture of crime, ladies and gentlemen, has become part of the mainstream culture in songs and lyrics and patterns of behavior, with even young men mimicking gangster behavior, even if they are not criminals. In a pioneering research titled Crime and Modernization, criminologist Louis Shelley argued that the type and level of criminality in a society is a reflection of its normalized values. And there's definitely a get-rich-or-die-trying culture that permeates a lot of the youth from certain communities, that not only glorifies violence and glamorizes the pursuit of status symbols by any means necessary. And the problem with this, ladies and gentlemen, is young people can't always see beyond society's vision of what is success, and will seek networks that promise them quick material rewards. Carrying a gun, it appears, has become a rite of passage for those misguided into believing gang membership and life in a gang will help them get immediate credibility and power, and allow them to keep up with the Joneses in a society where they themselves feel that that's the only upward social mobility that they need in their lives. Now, there are communities the police are not welcome to set foot in, unfortunately, and if they do, they risk their lives. And if they are shot at with the intent to kill them and they respond in light to defend themselves, it can quickly escalate to riots and extreme acts of civil disobedience. It's never a good look to see billowing clouds of smoke amidst blocked and debris-strewn roads and standstill traffic on the outskirts of our capital. And yet, everyone, it appears, is to blame except the individuals that do it. And no one is brought to account for their actions. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is an inconvenient truth and one of the things that does not build confidence. You see, one of the issues is that when it comes to communities that have their own sovereignty above that of the rule of law, and that there's this idea that the police or the rule of law cannot extend in the communities because the communities are in essence taken over by the gangs, then what happens is, the gangs occupy a public space that the police have stepped back from. More pertinently, the absence of security or police has often forced people in the communities to take safety into their own hand, and street justice prevails. If the police can't make them feel secure, they turn to street system justice, which is carrying a gun or a knife and binding to thug life, unfortunately. And that's why it's important that the police find themselves in the communities, that the police find themselves, not in, as they say, absent spaces in our country. Now, the missing files of the Naipaul Coolman case and the government being found to have to pay 200 million, ladies and gentlemen, did not build confidence with the business community. We've always talked about police detection rates, and that's a big thing. The police detection rates are low and so on, or the lack of it, right? But an inconvenient truth is the police build a case by investigation and gathering evidence to arrest and charge a person of committing a crime, and then the criminal justice system indicts the person and the case goes to court. It is through the criminal justice system that a conviction takes place and criminals are taken off the street. And many in our country are calling for hangings to resume. So we must also talk about conviction rates and how many killers are convicted and how many criminals are in all convicted. Remand, ladies and gentlemen, where most people who are arrested and charged find themselves, is not in itself a conviction or a prison sentence. What of the protection of witnesses, a key component in jury cases when it comes to eyewitness evidence? Protecting witnesses from being killed or cases that take many years to go through the courts is an important thing. How many victims of home invasions do you believe want to go to the courts and face the alleged criminals? One of the greatest issues that, one of the greatest fears that is perpetrating in our society right now is that of the possibility of home invasions. In many of the residential areas, it's seen as an opportunistic crime that people drive through and often find themselves jumping over walls and carrying on crimes and doing home invasions. Because, ladies and gentlemen, a criminal is not a criminal. A criminal in our country is also a gang member because a criminal needs to earn an income. If they choose a life of crime in a gang, because a gang is not an 8-to-4 job, and that's where the interaction of criminals and citizens take place. In the business of crime, income is earned by robbery, mostly at gunpoint. Robbery of businesses, mostly these days of bars, fast food businesses, Chinese restaurants, individuals, and home invasions, which means they get their money or things to sell or for use for themselves, like jewelry, phones, watches. Car theft is also on the rise, and most criminal activity of this type takes teamwork, members of the gang again. There's actually less burglary now of the single individual in the early hours of the morning than there are brazen holdups. Because, ladies and gentlemen, once they have a gun, it's easier to walk in and take what you want. The business of crime affects us the most is when they need to make money by taking what they do not work for and what belongs to others. And in that process, lives can be lost. People can be assaulted sexually and otherwise. Now, another inconvenient truth is this, ladies and gentlemen. As a business person, I've been representing business in the business community for many, many years now. And often I put my head on a block for businesses because I feel that the pursuit of business, family businesses, is an honorable thing. And it's a thing that has been in our country for many generations. That being said, business people should not fraternize or do business with criminals. I cannot say how much it embarrasses me, how much it sets back businessmen and women when it comes to the papers of businesses doing, fraternizing or finding themselves in cahoots with criminals. Businesses in no form or fashion should support criminality. And this is me, a business chamber president, saying that. In all institutions, ladies and gentlemen, corporate, private, and police, etc., government, there are actors and players from within the rank and file that seek to subvert and destroy the best intentions of that institution. And that can be found in all business, in all police, in all government, private, public sector, and it needs to be stamped out in all of those sectors. And if any institution is to be at its best and stand for its best to achieve its goals, and this is something that must be done, we must find a way to stop the corruption from within and the criminality from within. Businesses, again, should not support criminality, and that's the message I want to leave. The same gangs that have many different levels of operating, for example, on a higher level, they approach a business to wash or launder cash and say, we'll give you a part of the proceeds. This is the same gang that on a lower level, they will say, these people have a lot of cash and let's go and rob them. And then they come into your business and rob you. Similarly, criminals asking for loan or asking for businesses to get into partnerships with them to do legit activities or to sell cars, buy illegal guns, all those sort of things. None of those things aid in the fight against crime. The reality is that we need to make a clear and decisive division between criminality and all that is good and all that stand with the law. And one of the things that is most important here is what are the actions of the police and what are the actions of government? What can they do to rebuild that confidence that we have in our economy? And in rebuilding that confidence, rebuild the business confidence and change the landscape in Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vivek Charan. He mentioned some important things, the significance of family businesses in this country, the rise of home invasions, the problem of the detection rate, the connection between individual criminals and gangs, the quote-unquote trauma of the Coolman case and the award of the court. And then he closed in what I thought was a very, very brave statement for a businessman to make, making the distinction between legitimate business pursuing an honest livelihood and an honest enterprise and businesses that compromise themselves with the criminal elements. From Mr. Charan, we move on to an academic at the University of the West Indies, Dr. Randy C. Prasad. And he is a criminologist and coordinator of the criminology unit at the University of the West Indies. Dr. C. Prasad holds a PhD from the University of Toronto and an MPhil from Cambridge University. Dr. C. Prasad specializes in research methodology and statistics and has a research interest in economic deprivation and crime, gang violence, youth crime, and justice and penology. So we ask Dr. Randy C. Prasad, he is now senior lecturer at the University of the West Indies, and as I said, head of the criminology unit.
Calls observed. Give me 1 second. Sorry. Good afternoon once again, ladies and gentlemen. All protocols observed. The last speaker spoke about, excuse me, is there some feedback? Apologies, everybody. The last speaker spoke about the crime and security issue. This particular presentation is much more solutions-oriented, and I entitled it The Future of Crime and Security in Trinidad and Tobago. Now, I'm not saying at all that there is any simple solution. It's a very, very complex problem. It's multifaceted. There are a lot of issues that you would encounter in the criminal justice system and outside of the criminal justice system as you try to deal with the crime issue. It's far more complicated than gangs. It's far more complicated than police detection rates. It's far more complicated than inefficiencies and dealing with inefficiencies in the judicial system, because there are a lot of moving parts. And unless you approach the crime problem from the perspective of an all of country, all of society, and all of government approach, you're not really going to make a dent in the crime problem. And what I'm advocating for here this afternoon is just a part of the solution, but a part that I feel to be a very, very important part. And what What I'm trying to illustrate here is that there needs to be a lot more balance between crime and crime suppression. What quite often happens in the Caribbean region is that we place a lot of emphasis on crime suppression, and we should. It's an important part of crime control. If people break the law, there should be consequences. Of course, we need to use those consequences in a very judicial, very careful way. We don't just indiscriminately send people to prison for every single offense that they commit. We need to think about diversionary strategies, etc. However, where we tend to fall short quite often is in the area of crime prevention. We are talking about the use of a public health approach where you're dealing with the problem before it actually happens. In fact, you're looking then at the root causes. This is a part of the issue that we too often neglect. So looking at it from a suppressive perspective alone, meaning what the criminal justice system typically does is that where people commit crimes, there are consequences, but if you deal with it strictly from that perspective or primarily from that perspective, what you're really leaving out is the drivers. What are the things that will cause crime to happen? If you leave those things in place, then the crime will keep happening. If you think of crime as a disease, if you leave the drivers or the causes of the disease in place, then the problem will keep coming. And while we may think that the public health approach is a very expensive approach, it's a very labor-intensive approach, it need not be that intensive or that expensive. It depends on how we do it. It depends on who we target, where we target, how we reach, how we utilize the reach and resource types of ministries, agencies, NGOs, etc. So I just have here, not even going to go into it, but what the public health approach is about, defining the problem, identifying risk and protective factors, those factors that really are at the root of the problem that can either cause or suppress the problem, then developing and testing strategies or interventions based on our empirical understanding of what the drivers are, and putting those things in place, monitoring and evaluating, and for those things that do work, adopting widespread usage. In this particular slide, and I'm not going to go into it at all, this is purely for illustrative purposes, just to give you an idea of some of the kinds of drivers, some of the kinds of things that the public health approach will utilize. And quite often what you see is when we utilize this particular approach, we look at various domains, we look at various places where the root causes and the protective factors are situated, places like the individual and the peer domains, within the family, within the community, within the school, etc. There are different places that we need to look for the drivers and for the causes. Now, this slide is probably the most important. Very quick presentation, just a synopsis of what the approach is about, but I mentioned already that it gets to the root causes. Unless you tackle the root causes, the things that are driving criminality in a society, you're not going to get rid of it. You're not going to get rid of it. You have to go down to the grassroots level. You have to go down to the level of the youth and the communities and the problems in communities, to the youths who feel that they have no options and no opportunities via the legitimate opportunity structures. Find out what is going wrong there. Provide the kinds of skills, provide the kinds of opportunities, etc. I mentioned here, this particular approach has to be and can be focused and targeted, meaning you might quite often think, okay, if you want to get at the roots of the problem, you need to tackle the whole society. And it's far too broad, it's far too expensive to do that, but you don't need to. A lot of criminological research shows that crime tends to be concentrated. It tends to be concentrated among certain persons. It tends to be spatially concentrated. So the approach that tends to be taken is one in which you find those spaces. And I'll give you an example. USAID is right now implementing a crime and violence intervention in St. Lucia, Grenada, and Guyana, and quite possibly Trinidad and Tobago. They're spending $30 million over the next 5 years to do this particular project, but of course, they can't cater to the entire population of these countries. So one of their first steps is identifying the communities that have the highest levels of crime. So they will crunch the crime data, look at the spatial distribution of crime, find out very specifically where crime is happening the most. Even when they get into these communities, they will target the youths and the persons who are most at risk. So it's very targeted, it's very focused. And the solutions that they develop are specific to the needs and the communities that these youths in. So you give a high level of very focused intervention to a small group of people, thereby though maximizing the likelihood of a positive outcome. I mentioned also that under a public health approach, you need to capitalize on the reach and the resources that are available in a particular place or country, wherever you're going to put the model in place. So one of the things you would hear people say, well, that's far too expensive, impossible for the Ministry of National Security to do. I would say no. There are other systems in place, and I remember telling Minister this, I think it was just a week or two ago, we had this discussion. There are other institutions that have the reach and the resources that you could leverage to make this happen. And my example was the educational system. That's a system that is capable of reaching every single child in the country. Can the Ministry of National Security or any other entity, perhaps the university, design something that could be put into the curriculum that raises a child that has that moral conscience, that is socialized in a particular way, that they will be less inclined to engage in criminal offending, if things get difficult, that they have those kinds of coping strategies. It was not too long ago, maybe for some quite long ago, I don't know, but for me not too long ago, I remember the Student's Companion. I remember those kinds of lessons in civics in the primary school. Some of the younger folks will not know what the Student's Companion was, but can we do that? We don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are things in place. Let's say the GREAT program, the Gang Resistance Through Education and Training. It's a program that's fully developed and that can be customized to the local context. You put it in schools, it builds in youths that capacity, that mindfulness that they can resist gang joining, and that's very important. That is very important for some of our communities and for some of our youths. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel. The things are there, the tools are there. We just have to channel them and utilize the reach and resources of other institutions. So my final word on this is that until we see the solution to the crime problem as being a whole of society and a whole of government problem, I don't think we're going to make a serious dent. We're trying, but we need to keep trying. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Dr. C. Prasad. If I could just mention some of the vital things he said. He talked about crime as being complex, multifaceted, and therefore required that kind of approach to solutions. He talked of all of country, all of society, and all of government approach. He talked about the fact that we tend to focus most on crime suppression rather than crime prevention, which we should focus on, and he's advocating a public health approach. He said a very important thing. He asked an important question. What are the things that cause crime to happen? And then he said, if you don't fix them, if you don't touch them, crimes will recur. And then he outlined the public health approach, and he took a root cause approach, targeted and focused on the vulnerable areas, communities in which are crime-ridden, and young people. And he talked about leveraging resources and mentioned the example of education. We go on now to a third speaker. The way this was organized, we have the business community and the academic community, both from the point of view of crime and criminology and economics, talking about what they know, what they experience, what they have knowledge of. And you will see that here when the three are finished. And then we have asked the Commissioner of Police and the Minister to take into account what they have said, perhaps respond to them in an immediate way, but also to come to us with some of their plans and solutions. So our next speaker is Professor Roger Hussein. He is a professor of economics at the University of the West Indies and one of the, I would say, one of the more significant economists in the region. He has written about 10 books on his own and in collaboration with others. He has built the Trade and Development Unit. He has written about 75 academic papers in various journals. But more than that, he is involved in social activities. He founded an organization called the Shore Foundation, which basically has distributed millions of plants to people all over Trinidad and Tobago and has encouraged thousands of home gardeners in Trinidad and Tobago. Real results that are making a difference in lives. So he's a sound academic, he's a thoughtful person, and I ask Professor Hussein now to come and give his presentation.
Observed. So, Randy, that was an excellent presentation, and I think I didn't know. You all hearing me now? Are you all hearing me? Right. I didn't know I was coming after you until just now, but it flows well. So, those of you all who are familiar with some of the things I do, you know, like many other scholars, I could have been at the World Bank or IMF. I choose to be here. But it's painful to be here. It's when I watch this economy over the time span there, and you know, I spend on average between 8 to 15 hours a day looking at this economy. Some of the data sets in this economy I use the most in the world. And between 2001 and 2023, we collected about $50 billion US in energy rents. Energy rents is the actual price minus the budgeted price times production. And when I look at this economy and I look at the results, you know, much like Randy mentioned, going back to the root causes, I think the fundamental cause of the economy being in a terrible position today is the way we approach the management of the energy revenues. And a simple example is here. Basically, we collected about $430 billion on energy revenues between 2001 and 2023, and we spent more than that on transfers and subsidies. So we basically spent out all the money. Somebody would say, yes, but we have some money in the stock of reserves. Somebody would say, yes, we have some money in the HSF. Yes, but we also have a debt of $130 billion. So all the money is gone in my understanding of the facts. And we also have a debt on top of that. And we have reached the point where the purchasing capability of $100 is falling, but the dependency on the working population is rising. So basically, you have more people dependent on me and my money can buy less. So that could push some people into different type of activities to make ends meet. So one of the things that this simple slide here says to me is that we have to find a way or ways and means to improve the purchasing capability of the dollar and to reduce the dependency in the economy. And those things can be done, just like Randy in another form said we have to go back to basics. We have to go back to basics. We have to work on that labor force participation rate. I think only Haiti and Guyana have a lower labor force participation rate than Trinidad and Tobago. In 2003, we were about 64% of the non-institutionalized population being part of the labor force. Now it's about 52%, and it worries me. And nobody speaks about it, and it keeps going down. And the purchasing capability of $100, I just use $100 as a reference point, it keeps falling. So we have a situation, and the IMF already, I read the IMF report carefully. I never look at the text. I always look at the data. And the data tells a worrying story. Inflation for 2023 is posted at about 6%, and for 2022 at about 9%. What that will do to fixed income people? And I am a fixed income person. I'm not speaking about me here, though. Well, what that would do to fixed income people, that would mean your purchasing capability would fall even more. And so people on the borderline would now find themselves in more problems. And we need to, in particular, pay careful attention to the labor force. I'm doing a paper on murders, on the murder rate in Trinidad and Tobago, and I'm paying some attention to the labor force. And a significant amount of people are no longer employed. And people usually refer at this point and say, well, that's because a lot of people are aging out of the labor force. But if you look at the people over 60 years, you would see only 3,400 people between 2014 and the present age out of the labor force. So something is happening there in that people are becoming unemployed, but they are no longer being counted as part of the labor force. They are dropping out of the labor force. What are those people doing? Where are they? What are they getting themselves involved in? And here I show age dependency increasing and purchasing capability falling. And both of these things should be moving in the opposite direction. But what really stood out to me when I read the IMF report that came out about 2 weeks ago, and I'm waiting patiently for the detailed report to come out next week. When you look at the appendices, do not read the text. The IMF have a way, they tend to write polite. They tend to be polite in their writing. Look at the numbers yourself. You would see that for 2017, they downgraded growth a further 2%. For 2018, a further minus 0.2%. For 2022, a further 3%. So that when I looked at the economy in 2022 and I compared it to 2014, and I saw we were 16% smaller in terms of real economic activity in 2022. When I looked at the IMF report, it is saying we are closer to 20%. So the level of economic activity in the country, when you use the IMF data, in which I have great confidence, it's much smaller than we thought. And even more than that is the level of external competitiveness, where I designed the manufacturing strategy formula. And you would see, and I'm quite proud of it, the manufacturing sector is doing quite well. You would see that the manufacturing sector depends heavily on the level of external competitiveness as measured by a variable called the real effective exchange rate. So when I saw the IMF 2022 report and I saw the real effective exchange rate coming down, that was good. You know, I felt nice about that. But when you look at the IMF report 2023 that came out about 2 to 3 weeks ago, you would see that our external competitiveness is actually worsening, and it's actually about 8 percentage points higher than we thought. So that's something that we have to look carefully at. What is causing, and this, I'm using data from 2017 to 2021, so it's not just current inflationary shock that's causing that. The IMF adjusted the entire data set. What is causing our economy to become more externally uncompetitive, and how can we fix that? And again, from the same IMF study, the non-energy sector, and this is probably the brightest part of the economy, the non-energy sector is starting to show a little bit of life post-2021. And that's something that we have to build on. And just as the manufacturing sector is opening up, especially the food, beverages sector, and generating more economic activity there, we need to try to get agriculture And we need to try to get the services sector to follow the style and drive of the manufacturing sector. And if these three productive sectors could give us the type of productivity that the manufacturing sector has given us, we could start to see a little more light at the end of the tunnel. Now, I'm looking closer at the homicide level in Trinidad and Tobago, and I just disaggregated it using a Hodgkin-Prescott filter here. And what we see is that a lot more of the homicide changes are because of cyclical behavior. And when we look at the number of homicides and we look at the economically inactive population, we are seeing a trend that is worrying. So, Minister, we have to understand in a close way what are the factors that are causing people to drop out of the labor force. Why it is 70,000 people lost their jobs, and the unemployment level only moved from about 27,000 to 32,000, and only 3,400 people aged out of the labor force. Where did the rest of these people go? What are they doing? Are they joining gangs? I don't know. But it's something that we need to ask, because this is the live relationship here between the number of homicides and the economically inactive population. And it's something for the good of Trinidad and Tobago we need to understand, because by understanding it, we could intervene and change it. I did a forecasting here using a simple AR1 model, and I hope I am wrong, Madam Commissioner. I am seeing some figures for 2023 that doesn't make me happy at all. I'm stating it here so that you can make nonsense of these numbers, and at the end of the year, I will happily admit that my model was rubbish and I was wrong. Thank you all very much.
Professor Roger Hussein, you heard him there making some really, really sterling points on the economy. The earning of Trinidad and Tobago of energy rents over the last several years, decades, have been spent out when you look at income and expenditure. The earning power of individuals is being reduced in real terms, and the purchasing power is also being diminished. The IMF report really causes you to look starkly at inflation and its impact on fixed income citizens. The labor force participation rate, which seems to be suggesting that there's a high dropout rate, is something that needs to be watched, looked at, examined. And in the end, Professor Hussein made a connection between that and the crime itself. He asked a question. He didn't extrapolate a direct connection, but he asked a serious question about whether there is not a connection between this dropout rate in the labor force and market and the growth of gangs and criminal behavior. He talked about the shrinking of the economy, and he used the IMF report to mention that 20% shrinkage, essentially. He talked about the non-energy sector starting to show buoyancy, and he said that this needs to be done now for services and agriculture, and he closed by making that direct link between homicides and the economically inactive population. I want to thank these three speakers for speaking. They have outlined the position from their perspective, from business, from criminology, from the economy. And now we go on to the leaders of our country in terms of the management of policing and national security in Trinidad and Tobago. So I want to introduce the Commissioner of Police, She has been a member of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service for over 40 years. She has performed duties in different sections, branches, divisions, and units in the TTPS. During her tenure, Ms. Christopher was elevated through the ranks of the 2nd Division before becoming a member of the 1st Division in October 2007 and secured a position to the executive in 2016. Ms. Christopher, Commissioner, received many commendations for outstanding performance, devotion and dedication to duty, and good initiative displayed during the course of her work. She was first appointed to act as Commissioner of Police during the period October 16 to 21, 2022, and again in December 2022, until her appointment as Commissioner of Police on February 3rd, 2023. So we have a new commissioner, fresh in the job, but very, very experienced in the police service. And she brings a perspective to that job, and she is now in a position to do something in that job to make an impact on the crime situation in Trinidad and Tobago, and we invite her to speak to us this evening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. In the interest of time, I'll observe all protocol, but at least I want to recognize some of my members of my executive who are here to support me and to answer some of your questions when we come to that time. So I need to recognize them. So let me begin by thanking the University of the West Indies for its invitation and for yet another opportunity to present some of the plans of the TTPS to the national community. This exercise is an important one as it gives us the opportunity to share information and to enlist support in our fight against crime. I have listened to the valuable contributions of the previous speakers and understands the impact of crime on the economic performance in our country and the criminological issues and recommendations. So tonight in my 12 minutes, hope I can complete in 12 minutes, I will briefly share with you some of the plans the TTPS has developed and will be implementing as we execute our mandate to effectively address the problem of criminal activity in our country. And while I seek to do so as comprehensively as I can, you will appreciate, of course, that there is a limit on how much details I can put into the public domain for obvious reasons. The strategic plan 2022 to 2024 of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service articulates 5 strategic priority areas: public safety, community partnerships, operational excellence, information and communication technology, and 5, occupational health and wellness. While all of these areas are individually critically important, it is the aggregate effect of all of them being accomplished is what will accrue to effective law enforcement, which, in the context of Trinidad and Tobago today, will be manifested in a reduced homicide rate. And I say that because the barometer for crime in Trinidad and Tobago has for quite some time been the homicide rate. The police are working very hard and are achieving creditable results in many of its anti-crime initiatives, including the seizure of high-powered weapons. But those achievements are eclipsed and subordinated to discussions about the homicide rate. So unless the public experiences a reduction in the homicide rate, the public's perception of crime and their assessment of the effectiveness of the police service will be negative. Upon assuming the office of Commissioner, I have been critically reassessing our current situation and reviewing and updating our anti-crime strategies. It's important to try to make them more contemporary and effective to deliver the results the population is demanding. From the review, we have developed a national plan for fighting crime that will see an emphasis in operations based on some key strategic initiatives, and I will highlight for you 10. We know that we are affected by murders as a result of gangs, drugs, and guns. So to effectively manage, my first initiative will be precision policing of the power few. And this is a policing approach which allows us to focus policing efforts and resources on those highly concentrated violent crime, people, places, and time, the power few. And we will focus on them for best results. 2, dismantling of criminal gangs. We will apply precision-driven enforcement and prevention strategies to those communities with persistent violent crime hotspots and make effective use of the provisions of relevant legislation to disrupt the activities of gangs and prosecute gang members. 3, retrieval of illegal firearms. We will maintain a heavy focus in this area and continue to ask citizens to use our various communication platforms to give information to assist in the recovery of firearms and ammunition. And we know that for 2022, 87% of our murders were committed by firearms. And it is important to note that for this year, we have already recovered 185 firearms and over 6,384 rounds of assorted ammunition. Think about the number of lives saved. 4, we'll have an increased focus on transnational crime. We will upgrade our strategies and deploy additional resources to specifically target crimes of trafficking in drugs, firearms and humans, money laundering, and cybercrime. 5, we'll enhance police intelligence capability. All our operations will be intelligence-led, so we will invest more to improve our own capability and continue our collaboration with external agencies so as to harmonize the collection and processing of intelligence. 6, leveraging technology to enhance police operations. We will improve our efficiency and effectiveness by optimizing our existing technological capabilities, both internal and external, and invest more to close the gaps in our technological capability. 7, building police legitimacy and public trust and confidence. We will build relationships with key stakeholders, including the public, community groups, business organizations, religious groups, schools, NGOs, etc., and will conduct community needs assessment and develop and implement policing strategies and tactics that are appropriate to the particular community. 8, increasing police presence and visibility. A more coordinated engagement of all police agencies, including the TTPS, municipal police, transit police, and traffic wardens, together with a strategy of directed patrols to hotspots, guided by the principles of precision policing will be utilized to increase the visibility of all officers. 9, improving roadway management. Officers will be more present on the roadways, conducting exercises to intercept offenders. 10, exhibiting a zero-tolerance position on police indiscipline and corruption. We will work to create a cadre of officers that the public can trust to act with integrity and do the right thing always, and to treat them fairly and respectfully and punish errant behavior. Now, how can the police be assisted? The police needs the support of everyone in order to succeed in its efforts in reducing the incidence of crime. We need citizens to be law-abiding, to accept personal responsibility, to be law-abiding, and adopting a zero-tolerance position on errant behavior, whether the infraction is considered minor or major. 2, cooperate with the police in the course of their operations. The police are your partners in law enforcement for public order and safety. Cooperate with them. And I say cooperate with us. 3, you can provide the police with the information we need to be effective in carrying out our duties. If you see something or know something, say something. Ladies and gentlemen, I have shared with you some of the TTPSs of what we will be doing during my tenure to provide effective law enforcement in our country, and I have also identified the role you can play in supporting the TTPS in its endeavors. Today, I give the assurance that the TTPS remains committed and very focused on its mandate and will continue to implement the initiatives outlined and will fully discharge its responsibilities to achieve the targets it has set for itself. The last time I spoke at a forum like this, what was subsequently reported and widely commented upon was not the efficacy of the very detailed and comprehensive plans addressing several areas of policing to address crime, to address the crime situation in the country, but instead references to a single statement I made in relation to divine intervention, which I maintain is relevant to the discourse. And I say it again. And for it should not be taken out of context, we know that God is in control of everything. So we need his intervention. So ladies and gentlemen, if my presentation generates more wave of public commentary, but this time a commentary that causes us as conscientious citizens, both individual and corporate, to pause and assume some personal responsibility to consider what we can do to contribute to an effective solution, then my mission here today would have been well accomplished. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner of Police. So now you are leaving here knowing that there is a strategic plan for the police service focused on public safety, built on 5 pillars. And you heard the Commissioner say that she is well aware that the barometer for crime is homicide, and that unless the homicide rate is addressed, the perception will always be that crime is out of control. And you heard her outline a 10-point plan for how she intends to proceed over the next year or perhaps 2 years. So we want to thank her very much for her contribution. And I want to say that she's the first female commissioner of police that we have had in this country. And I want to congratulate her. And I want you all here, all present, to give her a round of applause. In the hope that she will be indeed a successful commissioner of police in Trinidad and Tobago. Now, what we've done so far is each of your speakers have had 10 minutes. The commissioner has had 12 minutes. And we have now the Honourable Minister of Government of National Security. I want to introduce him properly. And he will speak to you for 15 minutes, after which we will have a situation in which you can participate. And we hope to make that very interactive and buoyant, lively. So I want to introduce the Honourable Minister Fitzgerald Hinds. We thank him for coming. He is the Minister of National Security. He is also an attorney at law and has practiced for more than 21 years. He did his Bachelor of Laws degree at Queen's Mary and Westfield College, University of London. He has a Master in Laws degree with specialization in government constitution and legal education. And he also has a legal education certificate, LEC, from the Harewood Law School. Prior to his current appointment, Honourable Fitzgerald Hinds served in several positions in government, including Minister of State in the Ministry of Public Administration and Information, Minister in the Ministry of National Security, and Minister in the Ministry of Trade and Industry. He has also served on a number of committees and has been in politics and government for some time. Honourable Minister, we invite you to speak to us this evening.
Thank you very much for your generosity, Mr. Chairman. I suspect it is your former parliamentary experience and bias that rendered you the decision to give me an additional few moments. I like that. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you all very much. I must not avoid some of those protocols. Let me recognize the Commissioner of Police, Madam Erla-Christopher, who addressed you, Harewood-Christopher, who addressed you a moment ago, and of course the other members of the police executive present. I recognize Madam Professor Rosemary Bell-Antwine as principal of the UE St. Augustine, and of course the other officials and elements of the University of the West Indies. Of course, I recognize previous speakers here earlier, and of course the very distinguished Mr. Bassio Pandey, former Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, and of course all of you very distinguished citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you very much for inviting me, and on behalf of the government, I thank you, the university and the business chamber, Mr. Vivek Charan and others, for inviting us to this very important symposium. Dr. Hussein spoke accurately about the oil and gas revenues that we experienced over many years, and of course, some of which has been put to very good use, has given Trinidad and Tobago very good high standard of living, sustained for many years. He commented on inflation, what it has done to our $100 bill, prices, and of course hinted, therefore, crime. I'm not saying that that's all that he said, but there was a little line in there that says, perhaps that's the reason why people commit crime. The jury, for me, is out on that, because I know many people who could not be characterized as unemployed or poor, who found themselves engaged in serious criminal activity, people who were well off, and of which those things cannot be said. So for me, as a student of criminology myself, at postgraduate level, the jury is out. And this is not a new story. This is an old story as to the root causes of crime. Insofar as Dr. C. Prasad is concerned, I listened to a very interesting analysis of things, and he acknowledged that we need to take a broader approach to dealing with this, not simply focus on suppression, but on prevention, looking at, as the government has settled, and we were into a national consultation, it has now morphed into a regional consultation on the 17th and 18th of April, to dealing with crime as a public health concern, and there's great validity inside of that, and we will approach it accordingly. It may lead to some serious policy shifts, but we will have those discussions, and all the citizens, particularly the University of the West Indies, is expected to participate, because after all, in many ways, just like the church leads us on moral and spiritual issues, and should, so too we expect the academic community to lead us on the issues of economics and other matters that can advise and direct the government. I see this happening in many other countries of the world, and it is welcomed, of course, in Trinidad and Tobago. We as a government, we see ourselves as problem solvers. We come to office, we encounter tremendous problems, and none of you will dispute the fact that there are tremendous, very serious, some long-standing problems in Trinidad and Tobago to be resolved. So we have set ourselves the task of resolving some of them. And I do so against the backdrop of the fact that productivity, as Dr. Hussein recognized, is not at its optimum, not at its best in Trinidad and Tobago. So whatever we want done, and I see Mariano Brown writing some interesting articles within recent times commenting on aspects of this, whatever we want done to solve, to fix problems, we're doing it against a backdrop of an economy and a situation where productivity is not where it ought to be. Against a backdrop of a situation where corruption is endemic, and it is affecting a lot that we do and has to be done. You have no idea how to get little things going to protect you. Corruption of one type or the other gets in the way. And it's a constant fight. Not only from elements of the state, and there are many examples of elements of the state, people paid by the state, employed and paid by the state, in some cases sworn to protect you and I. And corruption has impeded a lot of that and continues. That's the backdrop against which we come. And Madam Commissioner, in her closing remarks a while ago, reminded us that we spent 3 weeks criticizing her because she summoned the greatness and the power of Almighty God. I define that as bacchanal. We do so in a country where bacchanal is a very ever-present element. And a lot of important things get lost in bacchanal, as we have experienced and we will continue to experience. For me, as Minister of National Security, I understand clearly what the responsibility of this office throws at us. My job is to communicate very effectively the government's policy which we glean from you, the people, what your desires are, what the mandate you would have given us at the last election and those before would be. And we identify the policies in national security and otherwise. We communicate this very clearly to the police service and all the other arms of national security as implementers of this on your behalf. Mine is about providing the necessary resources. This morning, I had the benefit of an invitation which I accepted by the leadership in national security, including the Commissioner of Police, to have a look at some of our systems, some of our assets, actually at work in protecting you, and benefited greatly from it. Better now to determine how quickly we should provide the resources that they require in order to do the business on behalf of Trinidad and Tobago and otherwise. My job involves encouraging and supporting law enforcement in doing what it has to do, and as I said, of course, providing the resources. The question of crime, and this brings me to Dr. C. Prasad's point, for some, crime is a business. It's a business model they operate, particularly organized crime. And therefore, it is not so easy to simply determine that it's poverty causing it. Some people apply all the ingenuity they could muster to plan and to orchestrate and to mobilize resources at home, regionally, internationally, to perpetrate what we call crimes to advance their economic interests. The private sector, not just state officials, is often as involved in it. As Mr. Manning used to tell us, the one who would have paid the bribe may not be a state operator, but he pays to a state operator to get some advantage over others in a process or for an outcome. So this is the kind of reality that we are dealing with. The motivation to commit crime, particularly white-collar crime, is very strong. Let me give you a little example. A cigarette sells inside of the prison for as much as $100. So if someone carries one pack of cigarettes in there, that's $2,000. And if he or she gets 10 of them in there per day for a sustained period, you're talking about $20,000 a day. The motivation is very tall. The motivation for a customs officer, with all of the systems that are in place, to turn a blind eye or to ensure that a container is not properly searched, cursorily searched, very, very, very high, very encouraging. Or a procurement officer to favor one contractor who bid in a process over another. These are just a few examples of how both the state and the private sector, which you represent, and I was really proud to hear you, Mr. Charan, address this issue confidently today, because it's the reality. It's the reality. So we, as a government, we have identified clearly some priority areas as a matter of governance policy, and let me share them with you. Border security. Very important. Today, the exercise I had a look at, and some of our assets at work, had to do with an element of our borders. And border security is extremely important in order to protect us from the importation of a lot of the stuff that is creating problems in here, none of which is manufactured in Trinidad and Tobago. Firearms is the easiest and the best example. As you heard the Commissioner point out, this is flowing from government's policy, a sustained campaign to rid the communities of drugs, illegal guns and ammunition across Trinidad and Tobago, a gun retrieval exercise carried on by the police. Nobody else to do that, supported, of course, by the Defense Force. Can I have some water, please? Oh, this is a fresh one. Can I borrow it? Community intervention. Community work, all of the agencies of national security, particularly the police, in building trust with the population so that you could feel far more comfortable to take the advice of the police commissioner properly rendered. If you see something, say something. For me, a high priority is the continued upskilling and professionalization of the police service, an important institution under the laws of Trinidad and Tobago with the responsibility to make interventions to prevent and to detect and to prosecute crime. So we spend a lot of time, we spend a lot of money providing training and other resources, building the technical capacity of the police service, because there is a lot of crime that goes unattended in Trinidad and Tobago for various reasons. And of course, regional cooperation with our international partners. Very important. We benefit from best practice models internationally. We actually get help from a number of our international partners, agencies, and states, and we work hard on that. So, in the context of what I have said, we understand, in the context of the discussion here, that crime, yes, does very severely impact the economy of Trinidad and Tobago in the ways that Dr. Hussein and others would have mentioned in their presentations a while ago. We understand the effects of that, and we know I need not rehash those things. We are paying particular attention to white-collar crimes because there's this feeling in the society, as you heard it loudly expressed very recently, where there are elements of the society, the so-called little people, who feel that there are some in the society who can do wrong and get right, walk away unscathed. And we are focusing on that. We have passed laws to deal with a lot of that. The Anti-Corruption Act, the Anti-Terrorism Act, an amendment to the Anti-Corruption Act leading to the unexplained wealth regime, where persons can be called upon to explain their wealth, the source of it. And if they cannot provide the courts with proper and satisfactory explanations, other elements leading to forfeiture can be applied. Of course, in so doing, we need the cooperation under the law of the banks and the financial institutions and other places and spaces where assets are made to rest or are further invested. We came to Parliament with whistleblower legislation to protect persons who, if they know something, is to be encouraged to say something, because a lot that happens does not happen in the watch of the police commissioner or any police officer. It happens in boardrooms, it happens in quiet places. And there are people who know. And this whistleblower legislation was designed to encourage them to safely and legally share this information and not be treated in the ways that people who do otherwise would be. And I have before the Parliament, we have before the Parliament as I speak to you, what I call an integrity testing bill, which provides for the random, spontaneous, routine integrity testing of a large chunk of state operators, including the police service, the defense force, immigration, customs, elements of inland revenue, elements of the Registrar General's Department. some of these require more than simple majority support in the parliament. And you know, sometimes in our best efforts to resolve these things, what we encounter. So I have just given you a small synopsis of some of the things that we are doing by way of legislation to try and to improve this. Coming back to Dr. C. Prasad very quickly before I move to a conclusion. Dr. C. Prasad was talking about the root causes of crime, asking us to ask ourselves, as intellectuals and otherwise, what are the real causes of this thing called crime? For me, as I said, the jury is out. But one thing I can tell you is that our youngsters today, our children, unlike in some of our days, they are exposed to a tremendous amount of violence on an ongoing basis, a daily diet of serious violence. I was in a bus, I couldn't forget it. I don't watch movies. It's a long time I didn't watch a movie, to be honest with you. But some time ago, I was in a bus with Madam Commissioner and someone else in the audience here, and we were traveling for about 3-4 hours on this bus. And our host put on a little movie. It was just pure violence. I trust you remember. The gun was the star, and obscenity was the co-star all the way through. And that is what the children of the nation and the world, the region and the world are being taught. So when we talk about root causes, for me, that has to be one of them. I heard the Archbishop of Port of Spain telling the country only yesterday from the pulpit that Trinidad and Tobago, and I'm casting no aspersions on those who enjoy that fare or that diet, but he is saying two things he said in his New Year message. He says, not enough of us in Trinidad and Tobago are sufficiently invested in doing right and social justice. That's what he said. And yesterday from the platform, he went on to say that he did some research and found that Trinidad and Tobago was third in the world, and this was from Google, in terms of consuming pornography. And our children have access to that on a daily basis. So these things are having some effect, Dr. C. Prasad. I am no sociologist, I am no criminologist, but I'm almost certain that they are. And of course, the usual human elements of greed and envy and the very materialist world that we now have come to know. So, we, as a government, understanding all of this, will continue to provide the resources that the law enforcement platform would demand of us, and the human resource elements and the training. One of the things that is causing the high rate of murders in Trinidad and Tobago, I want to submit to you, is simply the availability of guns. And this is why border security for us is the highest priority in national security, because we don't manufacture them here. And we have now come to understand the bulk of them come from not very far north of this place, the United States. And they know that, and they are working with us. As you would have seen recently, President Biden making strenuous efforts to regulate the distribution and the export of firearms from the United States. Every single country in the region is having the experience we are having. I heard the St. Lucian Prime Minister crying out to the world recently. Not long before that, the Vincentian Prime Minister. We are having it in the Bahamas, all over the region. We are having this problem. The availability and the type of firearms. When two fellas had an argument some years ago, it's fisticuffs, a bottle and a stone. That was not coming from a lethal barreled weapon. Now, firing a barrage of shots, assault weapons. You heard the commissioner's facts. In the United States, last year alone, they had about 6 647 mass shootings, leading to the deaths of about 44,500 people. So far for the year in the United States, over 9,800 people have died, on an average 114 per day from mass shootings, about 137 of them so far year to date. And these movies and all of this is inspiring our youngsters in this part of the world, and the guns are coming in. Again, we have to focus very, very heavily on our border security to protect us from those importations. And as you would know, recently, the governments of the region, including Trinidad and Tobago, joined Mexico, who brought something of an action in a US court against the United States because of the importation of their guns into Mexico. In the last decade, some 2.5 million guns were imported into America, into Mexico. So it is creating havoc all over Mexico. And they have gone to court on that matter. We, because we are experiencing the same thing, joined Mexico recently in doing it. And what happened? I'm a politician, so you will have to excuse me for this. Our friends in the opposition, when they heard that Jamaica, Antigua, St. Vincent, St. Lucia, Guyana, all of us, joined Mexico in this action to try to protect ourselves, our friends in the opposition jumped in to ask about the cost, how many lawyers we have, and how much it costs. So we encounter some pushback, some resistance, but I give you, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, the assurance that we will press on. We will continue to do all that we can by way of government's policy, the provision of resources, and the support for the law enforcement platform, particularly the police service, in trying to make this country safe and solving the problems of crime that you have to suffer on a daily basis. Good luck, and I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Minister. I think we've had a full range of presentations here. In the interest of time and in order to facilitate the discussion, I won't attempt any summary of anything that the minister said. I think he was clear, and I think you all understood what he said. I would simply mention that one of the things that he mentioned, besides the issues of policy, his differences of opinion, etc., and besides his policy priorities, one of the things he mentioned was new legislation having to do with integrity testing, an integrity testing bill for state officers, which will come to Parliament. I suspect that that may be a controversial matter, but I simply address it. I simply mention it because it was new, okay? It was something very new. So we want to open the microphone now for your questions. I would invite the members of the panel to please come up to the stage. And I think you have your microphones with you, right? So you can answer the questions if you come up there. And if we can take some of the questions that are being asked online so that we could relay those questions, share them with the audience and the viewing and listening public. And so everybody will know what is the question asked and see what the response is. Okay? Everybody comfortable? All right, first question, yes. Identify a name, make it a question, not an intervention. And let's try and keep it that way. Okay.
I'm asking this on behalf of one of our online viewers. The person says, I appreciate Professor Hossein's research and astute observations about the relationship between the state of the economy and the levels of criminality. The average Trinbagonian cannot, however, impact the foreign exchange rate or their own purchasing power. Is there scope for the average citizen to positively impact the crime situation, or should we just accept it as a structural issue and one for the powers that be to handle?
I am not seeing the person asking the question.
I was asking on behalf of the online audience.
All right. Would someone like to respond to that?
Are you all hearing me? Yes. Right. So, I looked in particular at murders, and one of the things that stood out for me from looking at the data in particular is the urgency and the need with which we need to get this economy back on a good pathway. I am of the view, and I commend the government because I saw in their last budget speech, they definitely made an attempt in that direction. I am of the view that the ratio of transfers and subsidies to capital injections must be changed in order to widen the supply capacity of the economy. And I think they have allocated $8 billion towards capital injections, and I urge them to not just allocate it, but to spend it out, to put that money towards roads and bridges and widening capital space, because that is the avenue through which we could open up economic opportunity, and by virtue of opening up economic opportunity, we make more use of the labor force and reduce the pace or reverse the deterioration in the labor force participation rate. And all I can refer is the statistical relationship between homicides and the economically inactive. So in that context, I think if we return the economy to some semblance of growth, and I am not speaking about energy sector growth that sometimes just depends upon the change in the price of oil or gas. When I say growth here, I mean specifically non-energy sector growth. So I think that there are opportunities there. If it is we could push non-energy sector growth in particular, that the probability is that we could lower some of the crimes that take place in the economy, and I refer in particular to homicides.
Okay, Mr. Fitzgerald.
Thank you, everyone. I am the Member of Parliament for Karen East, and I'd like to begin by congratulating the Commissioner on Police on her appointment. Commissioner, this question is for you as well as the Minister of National Security. Minister, I've engaged with you over the last 18 months and beyond that about the crime situation that we face in Kelly Village. We have had over 10 murders, assassinations with high-powered weaponry in Kelly Village within a 2-kilometer radius, and it just continues unabated. In fact, there was one in Rabindranath Trace just last week. We have had cases where persons have been assassinated with over 30 rounds of ammunition delivered to their body. So my question to you, given what the Commissioner said with regards to precision policing, gang dismantling, firearm retrieval, and intelligence-based policing, why haven't the police offered a gun amnesty as well as CCTV cameras on the Carney South Bank Road? There's only one way to get in and one way to get out, as well as we're asking over and over again for police posts in Kelly Village.
Okay. Minister, you want to take that?
Well, I see my friend focused his attention on me. I'll take half of that question, and I'll leave the other half to the Commissioner. Insofar as the first part of the question was, what was it?
But
no, the cameras I will deal with. The other
Police post.
Yeah, well, that is an operational matter for the police commissioner. But insofar as the cameras are concerned, as you know, there are a mere 1,769 or so cameras across the country in the service of national security through a service provider. from time to time, like any other equipment, some of that would become dysfunctional. We've had the experience of it being one of them in a particular case or two being dysfunctional and unable to provide the evidence to the police in trying to solve the particular crime. As a consequence of that, the government took the decision on the advice of the law enforcement folks that we will restructure the entire thing, and we engaged a service provider to put in a backbone and to make use of the more modern fiber cable arranged fiber network. And we are now in the process as we speak. They began in the month of February, and as we speak, 2,500 cameras are being installed in places strategically designed by the police and the Strategic Services Agency, and that work is ongoing. We expect that by September, they should all be in vogue and in the service of the people of Trinidad and Tobago in this regard. The other part of your question about a police station, that is not one for the minister. The commissioner will.
Commissioner, would you like to respond?
Well, the police are well aware of the activities at Caroni, and we are in fact evaluating the positioning of a post. However, we are focusing on a more temporary strategy of posting, of having a mobile unit at the area so that we can launch more patrols. But it must be noted that we have increased the visibility of police and we have increased patrols. We have members of the Guard and Emergency Branch and the Interagency Task Force effecting patrols in the area.
All right. Thank you very much. You have a follow-up quicker? Yeah. Minister, you have anything to say on the gun amnesty?
No. This government's policy in respect of the business of firearms is to, in an intelligence-led effort for the most part, and interceptions and searches on the streets, as happened last weekend, netting a very popular sports personality. The government's policy, which the police is carrying out, is a very robust gun retrieval exercise across the land. It's not about any amnesty. Guns are physical things, and we believe with the intelligence-driven approach and the tactical and strategic approach that the police regularly uses to have confiscated the 185 or so 185 weapons that they have so far seized, and with support from the national community, because we all have a good idea where in the house or where in the community these things are likely to be. And as the commissioner has quite properly asked, if you cooperate with the police to cleanse your neighborhood of that thing, you'd be doing, the life you save may just be your own. And of course, I know as I say so very quickly, you're thinking, but I can't give the police information because, you know, integrity issues and so on. That's why I told you, on your behalf, we are coming to the Parliament with legislation that will cause all police officers and other elements of law enforcement and the other agencies I described to be regularly and routinely integrity tested. So when you see it, you will have faith in it, and it will have faith in itself. And you won't have to worry about the answer to the question you may have been asking. Thank you.
I think both the commissioner and the minister said that their policy was one of retrieval. Next question. Anyone else?
Yeah, right here.
Yes, please. Could I start with the one standing there?
Yeah.
And this person here second.
Yeah,
I think there were two others. I'll take the lady in the back, the gentleman there after, in that order. Okay?
Yeah, pleasant good afternoon. My name is Andre Akers. I have a question for Mr. Charan. Now, in the white-collar issue, the major ingredient of encouraging white-collar crime is businesses. What is the business chambers doing to screen out businesses that want to join the association? The next question I have is for the police commissioner. I would like to see that the Professional Standards Bureau be expanded in that they would be able to randomly check on police officers to see the income they're making and the expenditure pattern to see if it meshing correctly. And if it didn't meshing correctly, or you proceed with further investigation to see what could be causing the problem. Could it be they have a money tree in the yard, they have a rich uncle, or whatever?
Okay, Mr. Chan, you want to start? And
Yeah, for sure. I think the instances of white-collar crime, when it comes to business, is not as much as people make it out to be. But the general intersection of business, or let's say private business, or the private sector, and government is where the largest issues of white-collar crime come up, because that is where the corruption issues come up that tends to find itself in court. Now, the situation is mostly when it comes to things like contracts and people dealing with contracts and so on, things like that tend to come up. Other instances, like the minister rightly said, is simple instances of bribing. One of the issues that we've always had in the business sector, we've always been asking for the ease of doing business. And one of the issues is that some people, instead of doing it the right way, they feel that they have a shortcut, in which case they find other more constructive ways to do things, right? And again, the intersection of that is between the private sector and the public sector when it comes to doing certain things or getting certain things done. And that might be custom officers, that might be something as simple as getting a WASA certificate, that might be something, for example, even getting a birth certificate or perhaps even a passport, because we have a culture here of knowing somebody. Do you know somebody that can help me? And with those words, you're kind of opening the gate to white-collar crime. The second thing is, with regard to the chambers and people joining the chambers, we do have a screening process, but I mean, obviously, when it comes to things like white-collar crime, it's a difficult thing to actually know who is involved. If somebody we know does have a case against them in court or has been convicted of something, that's obviously a red flag to us. Past that point in time, we can't prejudice anybody in terms of knowing what information about them, in terms of what they could do or not do.
no, just you asked a two-part question. One had to do with the Commissioner of Police.
If you can clarify the question with regards to professional standards investigate police officers. Are you referring to police officers?
Officers, because I'm looking at, I traversing throughout Trinidad and Tobago, and I've been told that the average salary of a police constable is under $10,000. I could be wrong, you could correct me. But I'm seeing you making more money, but yet you live in you enjoy, how to say? You have a champagne lifestyle. Something wrong. Something wrong. So
okay.
What is the service doing to look into these specific police officers that contributing to the crime in the country? Now, I would like to congratulate the police service in that it is one of the few professions in Trinidad and Tobago where you're actually seeing police officers going before the courts. But I would like to see more inside the courthouse, because it have them.
Okay, you would have heard me. My last point was the zero tolerance on police indiscipline and corruption, and definitely we will be looking into all those, and that will come under the Explain Your Wealth Act. So the Professional Standards Bureau will be using that act.
One more question.
Okay, no, let's have somebody else ask. You can come back afterwards. Who's the next person? Yeah, this person here, then the lady in the back, then the person in the middle. Please get to the question quickly, please. Huh?
Check. Good evening, everybody. My name is Bindra Maraj. I represent a group called the Sills Farmers Support Group. To you, Mr. Minister, and to you, Madam Commissioner, our farmers have been complaining to us about they are being held up, they are being shot, they are being killed. You know, at 3 o'clock in the morning, our farmers have to go to McCoy to sell their produce. When they leave there, they go home, bandits follow them. And what it leads to is that if they don't get them on the road, they get them in their homes. So this is now leading to home invasions. Now, apart from that, we all know the problems of predial larceny. Dr. Hussain and Dr. Sipasad are talking about the upward movement of the economy in terms of agriculture. My suggestion is we know the problems. We are not being heard. You're listening to us, but we are not being heard. Our farmers are producing in this country. Our food index pricing has come down drastically. We have a problem with predial larceny. I want to make a suggestion. Mr. Minister, with all due respect, can we have the Predial Larceny Amendment Act amended so we will have more jail time, more fines, and harder, stiffer penalties for people who are caught stealing farmers' produce and so. And the reason for that is this.
All right, well, we get the question.
I just have one more suggestion. I am giving solutions.
Yeah, okay.
Right, so that is one. In the farming areas, the predominantly farming areas, Madam Commissioner, can we at least have, we know the problem with the predial larceny squad, but there is no link with the predial larceny squad and the TTPS in the areas that they don't have the squad. So we were trying to see if we can get a link with the TTPS and the squad to assist the farmers. Also, by extension, Mr. Minister, if we can have the Army to assist us in the areas, like in the Toko area, where there's no squad and a very small, very small squad to attend to people, like in the Moruga area, the Chatham area, the Toko area. So I'm suggesting as a solution whether we can have the Army as part of this solution to assist our farmers. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks for your question.
Comment.
Go ahead.
May I please ask at the end of the session, I meet with you so I can get your contact number?
Yes, okay, so the Commissioner is going to contact and follow up. Minister, you wanted to respond to anything?
No, I just take the suggestions. I understand what the farmer representative is saying, and I take them wholeheartedly.
All right, lady in the back, yes.
Thank you, good evening. Laura Quentrell-Thomas. I have a question for the Minister and a question for the Commissioner. So you referred to the integrity testing bill that you are introducing, and yet a significant number of our members of Parliament and ministers are not themselves yet compliant with the Integrity in Public Life Act. How do you reconcile that, where we have our publicly elected officials who will not comply with legislation that already exists around their own integrity, and yet you're passing yet another bill for integrity of police officers? And further to that point, with regards to corruption, when will you proclaim the procurement legislation? My question for the Commissioner, and I respect that you're new to the position and I appreciate the outlining of your strategy, I didn't hear any mention of gender-based violence. So I wondered what part of your strategy will deal with the daily horrendous attacks on women and girls. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
So far as the Integrity in Public Life Act is concerned, as you are aware, as the country is aware, it places a responsibility on certain specified office holders, including, of course, members of Parliament and ministers of government, to declare your income and assets on an annual basis. I can't account for individual action or failure to act. What I can tell you is that we are all aware of the law. We are all subjected to it, and some persons file on time, some not. But the Integrity Commission, which administers this, does have some sanctions at its disposal, like public shaming and so on. They would publish the names of those who don't. And of course, they have gone even further within recent times to send pre-action letters threatening legal action, which the law provides for. So while I can't account for what an individual would do, I can tell you that there are sanctions for those who fail to comply with that law, and I have seen within recent times those sanctions being applied. And we must wait to see, but persons can be taken to court for failing to declare in accordance with that law. Thank you. As far as the procurement legislation, I speak now as one with access to the cabinet, and these matters have come to us. This matter has come to us, and we are making strenuous efforts. I know as a fact, we are making strenuous efforts to proclaim this law and have it fully implemented. But of course, there are some little issues that have impeded that so far, but I give you the assurance, this government, led by that Prime Minister, Dr. Rowley, really wants to get this matter sorted out. There are some little issues around the administration of it that you must get in place before you so do, and that's as far as I can go on this matter.
Okay, next speaker here. Next question. You have...
Okay.
Commissioner, you have to...
Oh, yes,
you are ready to respond? Yes. Sorry, Lara.
In as much as the police service is focusing on operating with efficiency and effectiveness, we continue to focus on our sexual offenses, gender-based violence. You would have realized we over the years, we did create a whole department to deal with gender-based violence. What we have done now, we have expanded that department to include all sexual offenses department. So, although I did not mention it, it remains to the forefront of our responses. Okay?
All right, we are supposed to end this program at 8. We will take it to 8:15, and that will be the end. So if you have questions, please ask, and there's a gentleman there in line.
Yeah. Yes, thank you very much. My name is
You jumped the queue, sir.
No, all right. I know, maybe see me cookie from fast. Sorry about that, but I had the mic. Yes, very, very quickly, I'm Francis Bertrand from the Point Fortin Southwestern Chamber. And I just want to quickly take a sort of back to basics approach in terms of all that we have discussed, and to get back to from the cradle to grave in terms of our school systems. And I want to suggest that we look at simple things that can be done without money. Getting back the IRO involved in terms of a universal prayer in schools, getting back some of the religious studies, because one of the challenges we have with these criminals is a question of moral and spiritual values. They do not appreciate the value of life. Their expectancy is from 16 to 35, they might die. So we have to go back using that old-time approach, and even getting back into simple things like scouts and Girl Guides. They may sound simple, but these are things that can be done, and the only currency required for that is leadership. You know, it's not an expensive thing. And that's quickly to close off on, in terms of Point Fortin, we have a potential .GG situation there where we just coming out of Petrotrin, we're going in the Atlantic LNG lane of persons. So that community has a potential to explode at some point in time. So I think I would want to mention something quietly to the Commissioner when she's finished. that we do some specific things looking at those areas. And then finally, there's a demographic to crime. It happens in certain areas based on all the reasons that we say there. So I think our leaders must not be afraid to go into particular areas and put the resources there, notwithstanding where they may be located on the political map. So I want to thank you very much for allowing me this contribution.
Sure. You can ask your question now. Thank you for your contribution, sir.
Good night, members of the head table. My name is Ricardo Mohammed. I'm the Vice Chairman of the Confederation of Regional Business Chambers. I also sit as the President of the Eastern Business Merchants Association. And my question to you tonight, to the Minister and Commissioner of Police, and any which one of you can answer. Have there been consideration in revamping the Marine Police, one, and two, the Eastern Business Merchants Association have been looking carefully at crime on the eastern seaboard of Trinidad and Tobago, which is our longest shoreline from Tobago to Mayaro. Is there consideration, or are there going to be considerations in setting up a Coast Guard patrol unit or enhancing any facilities that you may have on that eastern seaboard in the very near future, seeing that the guns and ammunition that are coming into the country and border patrol are major concern at this point in time?
Well, as I did indicate, border security is one of the highest priorities for the government for obvious reasons, and you alluded to some of that. In that regard, we have and we will continue to invest in seacraft, marine assets to dealing with that, and of course, other assets to dealing with that. Insofar as the Marine and Riverine Patrol Unit of the Police Service is concerned, that was recently revamped and reestablished. I paid a visit on them today, saw them at work, and to listen to their call for more resources to continue doing what they have to do. They have responsibility from the coastline to 2 miles out around the islands. So I don't know about revamping it. What I do know is that we need to upskill and give further assets and so on so that they could continue and improve on what they are doing, because they have a key role to play in that space in our border security platform. Thank you.
Okay, lady here. Gentleman in the back after. Gentleman here. Timothy here. 4 people. 5. Okay, go ahead, please, quickly.
My name is Tobago, and I'm a community activist. And one of my major concerns when I speak to young women like myself is safety. And I know the pepper spray legislation has been passed and all of that. Is there a possible idea as to when this will be available and accessible to those who really do care for their own safety and family?
The pepper spray is available. We have retailers. I believe the problem, we have permits were issued for the importation. And I believe that all systems are in place for the retail of pepper spray. It is available to the public.
Okay, can you give us the indication as to where exactly, for those who are not familiar, as to where they can really get purchased or get them?
No, I cannot identify where you can get it purchased. But I know that you apply to the police for the permission to purchase.
Yes. Okay, you were second, yeah.
Good night, everyone. My question, well, my name is Sheldon Jack, first of all, and my question is a 2-part question. First, Commissioner of Police, what is your view or policy or position on community policing? Because I think community policing is an important part of policing. And secondly, what is your position on the police youth clubs? Because I think that there are a number of police youth clubs that are doing tremendous work in Trinidad and Tobago. One to mention is the St. James Police Youth Club. I think Derek Shabadi is doing an awesome job. But a lot of times the youth clubs are starved for money. So I just wanted to find out if you're going to be putting more emphasis in terms of financing some of those youth clubs in Trinidad and Tobago. Thanks.
Okay. The youth club is a major initiative which we use to garner the youths. So yes, we continue. Actually, we have 97 active police youth clubs throughout the country, and we focus and we continue to focus on providing resources as much as we can, and we will continue.
Okay. Is that
But community policing, of course, in my presentation, I would have spoken about all our initiatives. And community policing, all our stakeholder engagements, they are all part of the way, I wouldn't say the way forward, of the continuity, because we have always focused on our community initiative, our community partnerships.
Good evening, everyone. Commissioner, I'd like to congratulate you on your appointment.
Thank you.
And especially as a hotelier and part of the tourism industry, to let you know that the carnival in Port of Spain was exceptionally safe. And I applaud the efforts of the government on this.
Thank you.
As we know, and from what Vivek spoke about earlier, crime is really suppressing a lot of business activity. Tourism is getting a hammering by, obviously, visitors coming in unsure of what their safety is going to be in this country. It's also fueled by advisories that are going out by the international consulates of telling people to be careful. So our messaging has to be very careful in terms of not sensationalizing crime more than what it really happens to be. And from what I saw you did on Carnival, I experienced it personally. It was amazing to know that you were able to suppress some situations before they could have fled any further. So congratulations.
Thank you.
However, I've not heard anybody said anything, but my perspective from where I sit, I see crime in this country is a larger problem and probably fueled on an organized level. I have not heard anything at all about the narco trade, and it will be interesting to find out how large is the narco trade in dollars and cents in Trinidad, in terms of the quantity and its value, and whether it's cocaine, marijuana, whatever it is, but it is a huge trade. From this trade, which is organized, obviously, a lot of drug men, drug barons, gangsters, it seems that they dwell in this particular thing, and that is where you have, certainly recently, a lot of killings, possibly in Kelly, as well as in St. Augustine and Freeman Road. Probably that's all drug-related. So that is pretty organized. It's not as chaotic as we would think. So it'll be interesting to find out what actually is happening at that level, and whether the police service is properly funded and resourced to deal with the narco trade, the drug barons, and the big players. And how are you curtailed and actually dealing with this? Dr. C. Prasad spoke about suppression.
Okay, well, let's take the question now.
Yeah, well, that is basically what I would like to find out moving forward. Thanks.
Okay.
All right. Commissioner, you will take that? Yes.
Well, I just might remind that in my presentation, I did indicate that we have an increased focus on transnational crime, and that focus will take into consideration the whole narcotics trade, narcotics drug trade.
Are
Yes, please.
Yes, okay. I will allow one final question. That's it. I'm at 8:15. In fact, I'm going over now, so one question here.
Good night, Minister. You actually defined one of the root causes of crime, which is culture, when you spoke about movies and all of these things, right? And the question is, how can we use the riches of all the culture that we have in Trinidad and Tobago, from all the different sects and all the different races and religions that we have here, to impact crime? How can we use our rich diversity to impact crime positively?
Okay. Minister, you want to respond?
Well, I don't have an answer for that. I just know that it can be used in response to a lot of the crime that we have. In fact, it is being used. I've seen groups, cultural groups in my community. I was associated with Malik folk performers, for an example. And I see the dedication, I see the number of man hours they spent in their practice sessions and the training, and Marcia Child's Dance Company as well, and the expression of these youngsters. And I know, just like the police youth clubs, that these things do contribute and positively to the development of the human person, the expression of the human person, that will not be criminal and criminally inclined. So I accept that as implicit in your thing, but how it is to be done, I can't tell you. Perhaps just much more of the same.
Can we sponsor a national conversation on that topic?
It would be a good thought. Why not make contact with us and we can look at that? I'd be very happy to engage that, because yes, it is certainly worth pursuing.
All right. Well, we've come to the end of proceedings for this evening. I want to thank you all for making this a very, very interesting, heartening, I think, and successful evening of discussion. And I want to thank the speakers especially for their tremendous contributions. These are people whose time is very precious, and for them to come here and to speak for 10 minutes takes a lot of preparation. To come here and expose themselves takes a lot of courage. And I want to thank them. Give them a round of applause again for me, please. I want to thank you, our audience, for coming out. And this is important. The Trade and Development Unit of the University of the West Indies, throughout the pandemic, this is led by Professor Hussein, kept the unit alive and kept conversation alive, having more than 20 sessions during that period online, that is to say through Zoom and so on. And the conversation did not end. And this is the first one that we are having in public, and we want to especially thank the principal for making this possible, and secondly, to thank the university for facilitating the process where this could become a live discussion once more. And we are very, very grateful for that. And good night to everyone. Thanks again for coming, and we'll see you on another occasion.